uh, I'd like to go ahead, and what was fun about this event was that we actually had a little impromptu Prince costume contest, and I'm gonna go ahead and show you the winner of that contest, who is going to receive a signed copy of Neal's book along with a little green apple journal that we're going to throw in. So let me do this screen share thing, and you'll excuse me, I didn't get into the book business to learn Zoom, so might take me a second, but I think it'll be okay. Can you folks see that? Neal, can you see that?
Yes.
Okay, great.
I
So
love it.
this is our costume contest winner, JD. So JD, if you are here with us this evening, do let us know, and we will get that book to you. We also we have your contact on social media as well, and I do want to go ahead and just read the little description that JD shared with us about why their costume is above the rest. I'm sending these to be considered for your Prince costume contest. I urge you to note the thorough details, the makeup, hair, high heel boots, trench coat with actual studs, not the cheap applique you see on so many Prince costumes. I challenge anyone to better cover all of the bases on the nuances. You can't see it in this photo, but they say, I even have the cheek on the mole, so there. And JD, you won. You deserve to win. So if you're here, we'll go ahead and send that book to you. And if not, we'll contact you otherwise. Awesome. Took my glove off for dexterity here. Without further ado, I'd like to go ahead and introduce our author this evening. Neal Karlen is a former contributing editor for Rolling Stone, staff writer for Newsweek, and regular contributor to the New York Times. He's the author of Babes in Toyland, The Making and Selling of a Rock and Roll Band, and other books on a range of topics from minor league baseball to fundamentalist religion to linguistics. A graduate of Brown University, he lives in his hometown of Minneapolis. His book, This Thing Called Life, Prince's Odyssey on and off the record, is the reason that we are here this evening. So thank you for joining us, Neal Karlen.
Thank you so much, Car. And you're the silver medal winner of I think you should show people your pants.
Thank you. I do. I took my glove off, but I do have purple pants on.
Yeah.
Getting into theme. It's on theme.
And you've got the Prince attitude too. Thank you, everyone who's here, and thank you, Green Apple. It's really a pleasure and flattering to be asked, and that with the world falling apart, you all came in. And I'm Neal Karlen, and I first met Prince actually when I was 12 years old. My grandparents, where I'd spend every weekend, I grew up in Minneapolis, lived 2 blocks away from him, and then cut to 13 years later, and I was working at Newsweek, and I took a freelance assignment for Rolling Stone, where I would soon go to work, and it ended up being me doing 3 interviews with Prince over the next several years. He hadn't talked in several years, and then I quit because I didn't want to just be like the Prince guy. But I moved back to Minneapolis by then, and we stayed friends. It's hard to say that without sounding presumptuous. It's like saying I was friends with Queen Elizabeth. But for the last 31 years of his life, the last time I talked to him was 3 weeks before he died. And I think I'll sort of explain the relationship a little by starting out by reading something. When I go to readings, the most boring part, for some reason, is usually the reading part of it. But I think I'll start there. The book's called This Thing Called Life. It was originally titled Formerly Known As. It was even on Amazon as that. So this is the book formerly known as, the book formerly known as. And this is the very beginning. It's pretty brief, but I hope it explains a couple things. And, you know, it's real informal, so please ask questions and stuff. And God, I didn't have to wear these when I first met him. I was so much younger. It was, anyway, okay. This is the prelude. I pray to God Prince was dead by the time he hit the floor. I pray Prince wasn't cognitive. Well, sorry, I pray to God Prince was dead by the time he hit the floor. I pray Prince wasn't cognizant, even for a mite of a moment, that he was dying alone in a nondescript elevator in a wonder-bred suburb of the racially fractured city that was one day too late in telling him his hometown, blacks, whites, the whole Crayola box of colors and ethnicities, loved Prince as much as he loved Minneapolis. Because there's one thing I'm positive I know about Prince. After knowing him in forever alternating cycles of greater, lesser, and sometimes not at all friendship over the final 31 years of his life, until our final peculiar phone conversation 3 weeks before he died, his greatest and perhaps only fear was dying alone. Prince didn't care if the end came in a Chanhassen, Minnesota elevator inside a building where he owned all the buttons, or in an opulent prime minister's suite in a Paris hotel, inevitably and idiotically redecorated for his arrival by a clueless management apparently determined to recreate for his pleasure Liberace's living room. He just didn't want to die alone. I always told Prince I knew he didn't honestly consider me a friend, but as one of the few people in Minneapolis who was probably awake the way he always was in the middle of the night and was willing and able, as my favorite song of his is titled, to talk about loneliness and death. I even rubbed it in the opening of my third and last Rolling Stone cover story featuring Prince, published in 1990. Quote, this is how I started the story. The phone rings at 4:48 in the morning. Hi, it's Prince, says the wide-awake voice calling from a room several yards down the hallway of this London hotel. Did I wake you up? No, you jerk, you never woke me. Well, actually you did a few times, but I was always happy to hear from you, even when you were so lonely and depressed you could barely speak. I told him I wanted to be a real writer, not the Bobo formerly known as Neal. I wanted to be Nathaniel West, and though he had no idea who Nathaniel West was, he seemed to understand completely. And we stayed in touch. Sometimes we talked on the phone several times a year in the middle of the night for between several minutes and several hours. Sometimes I got letters, sometimes on purple stationery. 2 of the 8 times I published what I thought were real books, I received anonymous purple flowers. Over 31 years, I guess we saw each other in preparation for published profiles on a couple of dozen occasions, saw each other socially 30 or 35 times, and talked on the phone a few hundred times in the middle of the night. About 50 unanswered or unheard calls from an unknown number registered on my phone during the hours when only Prince would call. When he wrote, I'd always write him back, care of Paisley Park. I have no idea if he ever got most of my letters, because I never had any idea what the hell was going on over there, even when I used to visit. An hour before I quit on that story, I sent my letter a scan of an old letter he sent me that began, Neal, please treasure our friendship as I do. Yes, he drew an eye for an eye. The letter's actually up here. I'm not making this up. No, it's over there. Oh, well. An hour before I quit on the story, I sent my editor a scan of an old letter he sent me that began, Neal, please treasure our friendship as I do. Yes, he drew an eye for an eye and ended, for real, I love you. Really, it's right up there. I don't know why I sent the editor that letter. Perhaps I wanted her to know I really knew him. We really were friends. Or maybe I just wanted to read it again and smarten up. Still, like the rest of Minneapolis, I neglected to tell Prince I loved him back until it was too late. He once told me he believed in heaven, and he thought if he made it there, it would look exactly like Earth. You can look it up. Rolling Stone, September 12, 1985. If he was right, well, hey, Prince, will you give me a call one last time? I forgot to tell you something. I love you too. And that's the beginning. And the truth is, I not only didn't tell him while I was alive I loved him, I never told him I liked him. Or we were friends. I never considered myself a friend. Again, it seemed presumptuous. I hate reporters who conflate their importance with who they're interviewing. And I just wasn't sure. I never thought about it. And it took me 31 years, and then the 4 years it took me to write this book, to sort of realize, whoa, he was my friend. And to say that without feeling like I sound like a big jerk. And I guess one question is, why another book on Prince? Why do we need another book on Prince? And there have been a lot of great books written. There have been some terrible books, but there have been a lot of great books. There have been great biographies, discographies, pathographies, poetry books, photo books, coloring books. But I hadn't seen any books that just showed him as a guy, as a human being. And he was a human being. It breaks my heart to say it, and I say this as someone who actually knew him, but he was the loneliest person I ever met, and he was the most compartmentalized. You can tell this isn't a shtick. I don't have a memorized speech or whatever, but he was broken by his father, who was a jazz pianist and gave him his stage name. He was the fabulous Prince Rogers, was his father. And it's a terrible thing to see a father jealous of his child. It was really, really terrible. And even though it sort of broke him as a human being, it sort of also propelled him to that level of superstardom which he reached. He had the talent, no doubt, to get over, but to reach the heights that he reached. And from Minneapolis, I mean, even Bob Dylan had to leave Minneapolis and go to New York to find a scene. Prince created his own scene here that actually existed. You could tell when someone was visiting Paisley Park, they were just too beautiful for Minneapolis. You know, it's like, whoa, whoa. So saying that, God, the Zoom thing is kind of strange because I'm used to like having people interrupt me and stuff and say, what about? But I don't, if anyone, you go see any other reading or see anybody in the news who says, Prince is this, he was that, he was this, he was that, it's not true. No one knew more than 15% about him. That's what I sort of estimate. And he was 15% of everything. And no one in Minneapolis knew who his other friends were, his real friends. No one knew who he was going out with. And he was 15% Jehovah's Witness, except when he wasn't. I may write about that a little. But all I knew was what I knew. And that's why the last time I talked to him, he called at 2 p.m. I kind of freaked out because for Prince, 2 p.m. is like 3 a.m. for most of us. I mean, it was nothing if he'd call at 3 a.m. But I thought he had his 2 p.m. guy. Whatever woman he was seeing at the time, he would usually take around in the morning to visit his parents. And the one thing I never saw in all those years of knowing him, including going on tour with him and blah, blah, was him asleep. He just stayed awake. He was very proud of that. And that's why I knew he was in trouble the last time I talked, because he said for the first time I ever heard, the only time I ever heard, that he was tired. And I think what really killed him was not fentanyl. I mean, maybe technically, but I think his death certificate should also read that he died of not being able to have a family. He lost 2 kids. One was 10 days old. One was a miscarriage. And also he couldn't dance anymore. He loved dancing more than anything, but he had double hip replacement surgery. And also his arms were really tired, and he wouldn't be able to play guitar or piano much longer. People didn't know that. His biographers, Laura Tebert and Alex Hahn, estimated that he played guitar more than anybody in recorded history. He practiced for 16 hours at a time. He just loved it. He loved it. And it's funny, the comparisons with other people. It reminds me of when I read the autobiography of Bruce Springsteen, who amazingly was friends with Prince. So they exchanged notes. And Prince said that was the one audience he couldn't steal, was Bruce Springsteen's. But in Bruce Springsteen's autobiography, he talked about just being depressed a lot. And he would put on these shows that were 4 hours, famously unending shows. And it was like, that was the only place he wasn't depressed. And I think it was similar for Prince. He put on, 4-hour shows, then go to a club and play for 2 hours. He just loved playing. He was meant for that. And he didn't want to be known for whoever he was. He wanted to be known for his music. That was it. And I think I'll try to explain his personality a little better by reading another short excerpt. I wish I could go, is this boring? So I'd know, but this is what you get. And thank you for coming. But Prince wanted to be known. I'm convinced he wanted to be known. He just didn't want to be there as people went about the business of figuring out what he himself could never figure out himself. Me, I kept my distance, never asked for anything, and wondered if this guy was my friend in a world where I take nothing more seriously than friendship. Nothing. Now I know, but once again, it's too late. And so Prince was whatever he was, except when he wasn't. Just as he was a devout Jehovah's Witness, except when he wasn't, which was often. Or the way he was a devoted vegan, except when he ordered rib tips at Rudolph's Barbecue, located a few blocks away from my apartment. In virtually all forms, Prince was what he was, except when he wasn't, which was often. At Paisley Park, Prince's swear jar ethos was strictly enforced, and woe to the musician who said damn. Those on that scene never saw the boss even descend to the level of profanity of aw heck. But if you felt like a Rudolph's brisket sandwich for dinner instead of kale and picked me up a few hundred yards from the joint, during the course of the meal, he would say, well, I don't want to offend anyone, the MF word more often than ever. So Prince lived a life where nobody knew more than 15% of what was going on in his life and brain. Still, that 15% could encompass a lot of surprises. And the problem, I repeated to friends over and over, dozens of times over the years, is how do you write something that if you read it, you'd yell, bullshit? And that happens a lot. And there's a lot of stuff in the book that just isn't known. And it's not because I'm Woodward or Bernstein. Luckily, he let me tape just about everything. And if you get the audiobook, they have 22 excerpts, little snippets that come before each chapter. So you can hear what he sounded like when he was sounding like a normal person, which he was. 15%, again, that portion of him that was just a guy. And it's really fun because to hear him talk, and I feel it was so long ago that it started that it really feels like a lifetime ago. And I wish I had been a better friend to him, or that I accepted that while he was alive. And what I tried to do was, it took me 4 years to write this book. All these other, you could write a post-mortem biography, I think, of Prince, just based on all that's been done in his name since he died. But I wanted to do right by him. And starting off, he was a genius, and I don't use that word lightly. I haven't met many geniuses, and it was both amazing to see, but it was also a prison for him. The very first question I ever asked him as an interview was, why are you talking now, after not talking for 3 years and vowing never to talk again? And he said, I want people to know I don't live in a prison. And when someone says something like that, it's sort of like them saying, I feel like I live in a prison. And it was that prison of being a genius, of ideas, like a pinball machine, just banging against his head every second of every day. And he said he wished he didn't have to eat, that he didn't have to sleep at all. But the idea is he couldn't turn them off. And every real genius I've met, and I've only met a few, they usually either end up killing themselves or end up as huge narcissists. I wouldn't put that in any of those categories for Prince, but he suffered for his art. And I wouldn't wish being a genius on my worst enemy, when you see how it just separated him from people. And there was a mystery to him that just couldn't be explained. And I hope that if you read this book, you'll get an insight into who he was as a human being and as an artist, and the forces that sort of made him, why he behaved the way he did. He was so smart, and yet you could talk to him sometimes and you would think he was the stupidest person you ever met. And it was all a ploy, you know, him changing his name to an unpronounceable glyph. It sounds ridiculous. People remember that. When he was 18 and appearing on American Bandstand, he didn't talk to Dick Clark when Dick Clark asked him questions. He just motioned with his hands, and it was real weird. People said he's gone mad. But Dick Clark remembered that 40 years later and was still talking about it. So he always knew what he was doing, even if what he was doing seemed insane, ridiculous, or brilliant. And I think I should sort of stop talking now and see if anyone has any questions or wants to talk about anything.
Neal, not boring at all. That's from me, and also from several comments that we got in the Q&A. Not boring at all. I got a lot of, no, please keep going, my goodness. There are a lot of questions. I had a couple of my own, so I just want to pepper those in before we get to the audience questions. I was wondering if you could just talk about, why do you think, I know you had a long relationship with Prince. What do you think maybe specifically he found comforting in your reporting style? What do you like, as opposed to other people? Because you got just a different version than a lot of other reporters received, I would imagine.
Yeah, I was, you know, in one way, I really don't know. And I've just tried to figure it out. And I'm not the grooviest guy out there. I'm not the best writer. I'm not the hardest writer out there. One thing he liked, this is in the book, the letters to, he wrote that, thanks for telling the truth. Love God. That it doesn't seem that hard. It's sort of the gig, but so much wrong was written about him. And I think he liked that. When he got elected to the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame in 2004 and gave us that amazing performance, in his speech, he said, everyone should have a mentor and someone who isn't on his payroll. I don't think he was referring to me, but I wasn't on his payroll, except for, I got paid for one thing when I wanted to make sure I didn't have to write about him again, because then I could never write in the guise of an objective journalist. But there are two things. One, when I was 12, I could spin a basketball on my finger and do tricks with the basketball. I wasn't, because I was a third string basketball player up through ninth grade. And he was a great basketball player. But Andre Simone said, yeah, that would make him remember you. And I don't really know. He didn't know I was from Minneapolis either when we first met in the second incarnation, when I wrote the story in 1985, when I was 25. And I have it on tape. It's weird. He's going, now there's a difference between North Minneapolis and South Minneapolis. And I said, oh, I know that my grandparents live right there. And they were like the last white people after the riots that hit every city in the 60s. And they were immigrants who never learned English. And my grandmother said, my father translated, we've walked far enough, and they just stayed. and that may sound stupid, but he so liked basketball. And I just didn't ask for anything. I mean, he didn't like a lot of people. And I'm not saying that because I'm Miss America and so likable, or I'm a Prince whisperer. And weirdly, one thing you can already tell just from my spiel, I have this tendency to talk about 7 different things at once and not make transitions in between. So most people don't know what I'm talking about and think I'm crazy. He loved that. He could understand, and he used to put down people who say, I can finish their sentences before they finish them. And he just thought it was amazing and not something cuckoo, which it usually is, that I could be going on 7 different topics, and he could understand. I mean, that's why I started writing in 7th grade, because no one knew what I was talking about. I was just, it's like if Adderall had existed, I would have been on that in 15 seconds, I think. But this is a long way around to say, I don't know, really, to be honest. It's just me, but it's no magical, thing, and there's no one answer. I told the truth, and I tell the truth in there, and thank God that there are tapes and everything, because I wanted everything to be provable. So I think should I shut up or keep going? I think they'll still be writing biographies of him in 50 years, in 100 years. And I just wanted there to be something where, okay, this is what he really said. These are provable, someone will be able to write that definitive biography that no one can right now. We're too close to it. Yeah. So that's it, Zerda.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Did that make any sense?
Oh, of course. And I'm not expecting there to be any one answer. I didn't even expect you to have an answer, because it doesn't sound like he would have necessarily told you outright, this is why I'm comfortable with you.
But it's it seems like an unlikely friendship. I mean, when I wrote I hadn't written about him for 26 years, the last 26 years of his life, because I wanted to write about other things and not be stereotyped as, the Prince guy, which is kind of what was happening. It's all anyone would talk to me about. Oh, he's Prince's friend. He's Prince. Yeah. And the editor, I wrote this little piece just for the Minneapolis paper. We had an agreement about what we do depending on who died first. And I was sure he'd live to be 93 and be playing like B.B. King or Muddy Waters. And I'm never sure I'm not going to get hit by a bus after wherever, after this is over. Maybe I'll get hit, but I just couldn't believe he went first. And so all he wanted was one little article in the hometown newspaper. And if I went first, he was going to play at my high school for an hour. And I knew he'd play for 3 hours, and the kids wouldn't have to go back to class. But I never really figured out, because there's so many more. Oh, so I wrote this piece, and the editor, she's writing the headline. She said, kind of embarrassed, she said, "Do you mind if I put unlikely friendship?" And I said, "Sure, that's fine." And then GQ did an oral history, and the writer said, "How should I define your friendship?" I said, "How about unlikely?" And then I thought about it, and it seemed actually quite likely. I mean, the unlikely part was that we'd cross paths, but once we did, those people you just get along with. And I'm easily intimidated. I'm intimidated by you folks out in Screenland, but I wasn't by him, and it's just one of those things that clicked.
I think too, just by virtue of being a journalist, that you have that ability to probably relate to people in a different way than people of other occupations might. That's just my opinion. I will say that, I wanted to apologize. I'm wearing this mask because I'm broadcasting from our store. So if it's a little difficult to hear me, that is why. I'll try and, 1, I'll try and limit the amount that I am talking at all. And 2, I'll try and project. I just had, I do want to get to other people's questions because we have a lot of them. So I won't ask you too many more, but I was wondering, because you're from Minneapolis and Prince, developed this like Minneapolis sound, and there's this, there's a particular style of art that comes from Minnesota, from the Midwest. We talked briefly via email about the Coen brothers. And what do you think it is about, like, regionally speaking, that produces the kind of very unique stylistic art that comes out of Minneapolis and around?
You know, that is one of the big questions because it's a very conforming place. It's not like San Francisco. They talk about Minnesota nice. I have a chapter in there called Minnesota mean. And I talk about, there were always a core group of thousands who loved Prince, but Minneapolis was the last place in the country to play him on the radio. And it was only sort of the day after he died that this immediate revisionist history took over. And it's sort of, Minnesota's a weird place. It's the Scandinavian ethos of don't get too big for your britches. It's called Janteloven, which is, it's like the Japanese thing about, you know, the weed, the blade of grass that rises above gets whacked. And it wasn't until he died, and I'm no different. I didn't really appreciate it till he was gone. But when you think, like when Prince was one, he was making music, his mother recalled, banging stones together. Bob Dylan was across town about to get kicked out of his frat at the University of Minnesota for banging on the piano at midnight, atonally. What kind of place would do that? Or the Coen brothers who went to my high school, because if you want to say something sucks in Minneapolis or Minnesota, you don't say that sucks. You say, well, that's different. You know, it's, and I think a lot, you know, the George Floyd, at first I was glad Prince wasn't going to come back. And, you know, Prince wasn't, because I thought he would die again if he saw what was being done with his name. But then when George Floyd happened in Minneapolis, I wish he could have come back, because I think he would have provided the right soundtrack for that. And I don't mean an entertaining thing, but he was very politically involved. People don't really realize, but all the way back in the 90s, he gave Spike Lee the money to finish Malcolm X in Baltimore with Freddie Gray, you know, in 2015. And I just think something remarkable would have come out of that hideous, horrible, you know, life-changing moment for everybody in town. And Minneapolis will never be the same. But I wonder, some people think it's because winters are so long here that people can practice for 5 months. But it's another mystery. It's a contradiction, because there's such, conformity is taken very seriously here, not to be different. If you want, in New York, if you're called a character, it's a compliment. I'm a character, you know. But in Minneapolis, it's an insult if you're called a character, you know. And there were so many contradictions to him. I mean, we all have contradictions. We're all generous and cheap. We're all, I mean, you know what I mean? We all have these different things, but I've never seen someone who had more contradictory things. For instance, he was, when I first got the call that he wanted to talk to me, I'd interviewed Wendy and Lisa first, and then they talked to Susanna Melvoin, Wendy's identical twin sister, who was his fiance, and blah, blah, blah. And the music editor, Rolling Stone, tried to take the story away from me. And he said no. And no, he was so loyal to me forever. And this is the guy who's supposedly the most disloyal person there is, who'd fire his best friends and never speak to them again. And that was another important thing, was I was never his best friend. But if he called you his best friend on Tuesday, you could be sure he would never speak to you again by a week from Wednesday, you know? So again, keeping your distance. He was one of those kind of people.
Thank you.
I have no idea what the question was even anymore.
Oh, it was years ago. It's fine.
Okay, good.
Okay, I'm gonna go ahead, and I'm so excited to be here with you, and I'm so excited that the audience is full of Prince fans. That's who I want to be around all the time.
Yay.
So
hi, everybody.
Let's see. We have a question here from Ginger that says, this is interesting. I feel like you may have answered this already, but it's interesting. In later years, did Prince directly ask you to write anything biographical for him? You mentioned a tiny news clip, but was there anything else?
No, we had talked before about he was going to write like a fake biography, and it's almost what came out. The beautiful ones I thought was terrific. Um, it came out last year, but he'd only written 29 pages of it. But Random House had paid him $2.5 million right before he died, and they didn't want to give Paisley Park didn't want to give the money back, so they opened up their vaults and everything he had, and they got a writer who wrote, Dan Piepenburg, who wrote a very good introduction. And I think Prince wanted to muddy things. You know, he was a very good liar. And so that book is terrific, and I don't think it would have been that good. So he knew I didn't want to do that, and I've ghost written. For a couple books, and I never wanted to do that again. You're just caught in the middle, and he knew I wanted to write other stuff, so I knew it was coming on. And I don't, people kept saying he wants you to write this biography, or he wouldn't have let you tape everything. He wants, and I actually don't think I was the answer to any question he had in his mind. So it had come up way before. He got a list of writers who were under 30 who'd never written a book before. That's who he wanted to write his book. So there'd be a blank canvas. So, and I think it turned out really well. I wouldn't have wanted to, I just didn't want to do that. And he knew that. And so it was very funny. After about 2 years, I was, it wasn't funny. I was in the coffee shop where I was writing, and someone came up to me and said, I don't mean to offend you, but why another book about Prince? And I said, I'm not offended. I'm not. And I went home and I got in the shower, and I must admit, I spoke to Prince. I don't talk. I have lots of friends who believe in the psychic and all that, but I just went, what do you want me to say? And I burst into tears, and thank God I didn't hear any, a return response. But I just remembered that first letter he sent that said, thanks for telling the truth. And that's when I realized, okay, that I can do. And that's what I did. And I hope I did it good enough so that it's, that I did write by him as a friend, and that it's a good, not just an entertaining read, but people know that it's a true read. This is, not creative nonfiction. I want to make sure people know that it's really true. It's not me trying to be creative. It's nonfiction,
Absolutely.
Thanks for the question.
Yeah, this is, thank you, Ginger. This is a comment from Patty and Sarah Blue. Hi, Neal. Thank you for sharing with us. Congratulations on your book release.
Hey, you guys, I know that the Prince world is great. I've never met them, but I feel like I do. It's like when you see what Facebook could be, I've seen it a couple of times instead of what it is. It's like the purple community is just wonderful, and I'm proud to count myself amongst them. So hi, you guys. Thank you very much.
We have a question. I think I know who this is from. CWD asks, I've heard legends of Prince's sense of humor, like making pancakes for guests. Any stories or memories to that effect?
He was hilarious. That was the thing. And what's fun about these tapes that you can hear if you buy the audio, I feel like a used car salesman, and I got watches here for sale, is him laughing. I wish he had been happy more of the time. But he'd do everything from one-liners, like, I'm trying to think, if your shirt was really garish, he'd say, can you turn that shirt down? It's too loud, But I'm thinking of something where he had done this thing in 1990 where 15 seconds before an interview started, he said, you can't tape this or take any notes. And he started doing that with all reporters. And it was like, what are you doing? And it started as a practical joke. And I started swilling Diet Cokes for hours. And I said I had a bladder infection. And I would run off to the bathroom and write on toilet paper. I had really long hair then and a pen behind my ear. And it's amazing how much toilet paper you can stick in 4 pockets. And he knew what I was doing. And he sort of enjoyed, he had that kind of twisted sense of humor. And I finally got him back. To give you an idea of what he would do is, I was at this place, Rudolph's Barbecue, which is sort of his joint. Like John Gotti had the Ravenite Social Club in New York. And the only favor I ever asked him was, I was having dinner there with a friend, and he came in with this entourage, and I just always stayed away from his entourage. But I went up and I just said, I really like this woman. She was actually just a friend. Could you come by the table and just say hi, Neal? That would be great. And so I waited about 45 minutes. I didn't know if he would. And then he came with, his entourage. Everyone was like 6'6", 300 pounds. And he said, hi, Neal. And I turned to him and I said, I'd read this in Don Rickles' book he'd done to Frank Sinatra. He said, and I said, Prince, will you wait? Can't you see him in the middle of a conversation? And there's this silence. This gang of 6'6" people, waited to see if they should kill me, because, Prince would say jump and people would say on who, and he loved that. He laughed so hard, even though he also had this gaze that I say could stop a sundial, but that and that wasn't about what a sense of humor I have. It was that he could laugh at himself. The very first time, I hadn't even talked to him yet. I was flying back to Minneapolis to actually visit my folks when the call came that Prince is going to talk. And I got home and my then alive mother obviously said, the Prince called. She'd always called him the Prince. And I was on call waiting had just come in or whatever. And I hung up on him and he didn't leave a number. And I thought, oh, great. He's never, my big scoop. And he just thought that was great that my mother had hung up on Prince. It was, so he was, but it was the way he talked. He was good at one-liners and he loved sitcoms. That was the other thing that was bizarre. He did the greatest Fonzie imitation. And Andre Simone talked about, who lived with him for 4 years, how he just loved these sitcoms. And The Office was one of his favorite shows. In the last conversation we had, he did Stanley from The Office. He had whole sections memorized, and he was very aware of popular culture. And it was really surprising. And among the things I was sad, not being glib, it was a very worrisome phone call, but I wish I'd got him to do Fonzie one last time, And he was funny, but it got me that everyone would talk about how funny he was, but they never had any examples, He was one-liner funny and he was street corner funny, noticing things. And it's fun to hear him laugh. It was really fun to hear him laugh.
That's delightful and very heartening. I love to hear that. Going off of that, we have a question from Melina who asks, who were Prince's favorite authors? Greetings from Australia. Who were Prince's favorite authors? Did he like to read when he wasn't making music?
He did. He had very varied tastes. People have always, the Ballad of Dorothy Parker, people say, oh, he had no idea who Dorothy Parker was. No, he did know who Dorothy Parker was. And if you read her best short story, I think, Big Blonde, and compare it to the lyrics, you'll go like, well, yeah, he did know that. He loved the book Homicide, which was written by the same guy it was later a TV show, and whose next TV show was The Wire, David Simon. He loved that street corner thing. He loved Iceberg Slim. That was another one of his personas. This sort of, his big book was Pimp, about written in the 30s. It's sort of that part of his persona is how he's dressed and behaving when he's playing at the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame in 2004. That part where he just blows everyone off the stage. He would love investigating different topics. he was very interested in the science of lying. That's why he liked the book Homicide, which that TV series was based on, because he'd see how police, would figure out that. And he thought it'd be good for the music business. Unfortunately for that, the people at Warner's who signed him were the most honest, beloved people, Mo Austin and Lenny Waronker, in the business, so he didn't get to use that. And they were, Mo Austin, who was chairman of Warner Records till 1984, had started as Frank Sinatra's accountant. And he loved going in and talking to Mo about Frank Sinatra and Dean Martin and the mafia and that kind of stuff. And these old guys were hurt when he did the whole slave thing. And again, people thought he was cuckoo, for wanting to own all his own stuff. But he helped so many artists now that at the time he behaved, people thought he was being cuckoo. So he had very varied taste. And especially early on, he always wanted to learn everything from everybody. Lisa Coleman taught about classical music, and he wasn't enslaved to anything. And he loved libraries too. He loved going to libraries. So he had very Catholic tastes, not like Catholic, the pontiff. Is everything the Pope says pontificating? I don't know. But he would read about sports and the Kabbalah, and there's a scene in there where he goes to see a Hasidic rabbi with me, who is a part of a book I wrote about the Kabbalah, and he was very interested in reincarnation, and he said, "Do you believe in reincarnation?" To the Hasidic rabbi, he had a beard to his chest, and he said, "I believe you can be reincarnated in your own lifetime." And I think Prince really is proof of that. He was many people. He lived a lot of lives for one lifetime. And I think we're lucky that, it was shocking. I was shocked that the death of anybody who wasn't in my family would destroy me the way his death did. But when you think of all the people who died at 27, like Kurt Cobain and, Janis Joplin, and that's famous, Jimi Hendrix, that we had him for so long and he was able to produce up until the end is just really marvelous. And I just wish he had more fun along the way. But again, when you grow up like he did in an abusive household, what you saw in Purple Rain, though he denied it in print, was reality. That is, that was his father. And he'd talk about his mother really nastily. He'd say she was a drug addict. She left hardcore pornography lying around. In fact, she was a very dignified woman who he was very close to. She was a social worker for the Minneapolis school systems who specialized in helping people with addiction problems. So not only was she not, and she was his closest advisor, but he just wanted to muddy the record. And I think he pretty much did. And that's another reason I wanted to write this was, there is a record there. He was a person. He everything you think he always was, he wasn't. And it's a Rubik's Cube. And again, he could have just had more fun. And he died. Some people go, "Oh, he rock star, overdose." And he wasn't partying. He hurt. Those were work-related injuries when you'd spent 40 years jumping off speakers. And he was hurting since the Purple Rain tour in 1984. Every video you see after 1984, he hurts, but he couldn't stop. It's that genius part. He talked about that there was a voice inside saying, keep going, I'll tell you when to stop. Thanks for the quick. I don't know if I answered anything there, but
I'm sure you did, and it was insightful nonetheless. But yeah,
the book makes much more sense. It just took 9 drafts. That's so they made sure that it didn't read like, a Lawrence Ferlinghetti, who I love, a long city like, posy. So the book actually does make sense, sentence to sentence.
I think I'm sure. I think that's what's interesting about like the self-mythologizing, and also what he appreciated about you and telling the truth and getting at the truth, whatever that is. It's Bowie's similar. They have similar legacies of having many lives in one life and personas and being unknowable. And Anyway, let me get back to the great questions that we have, and that reminds me, thinking of setting records and bookkeeping, as it were. Felix asks, says, "Hi Neal, great stories. Did Prince share any unreleased music with you?"
He did, and then it was later released. So everything unreleased I heard he did release. So I'm trying to think. "Old Friends for Sale" was one of the first songs he did, which he changed the lyrics a lot, and released it 15 years after or 10 years after. But so there's not like, oh yes, I've heard these fabulous 10 songs that haven't been released yet. Whatever, I mean, I'm sure I know he's got, billions of hours, but everything he played me that hadn't been released was later released. And it just kept coming out. He couldn't turn it off, which is both great and horrible, I mean, for him, he couldn't, to not be able to just do that. It just, I'm glad I'm not a genius, Thanks for the question.
I am, where should I go first? You talked about this briefly, but I'd love for you to describe it in a little more detail if you'd like. Melissa asks, "You met him when you were 13. What was that like? Was there any exchange then?" You mentioned the basketball and that, if you want to talk about that a little bit, I'm sure Melissa and everyone else would love to hear.
Yeah, thank you, Melissa. To be honest, I didn't remember. He said, "I remember you. You were Casper." We called you Casper because I was the one white kid. I remember when I first went out there, I'd been kicked out of my grandparents' house because my older brother had said, take a bite out of my grandmother's wax fruit. And I was, older brother, I'd do whatever he did. So I got kicked out and I went next door, and he was really funny then, and then but I wouldn't say like, oh, we were buddies and that was it. We were bonded, he's the one who remembered it. And at first I thought it was baloney, and he was, flattering me for some reason. And, but I've chosen to, it came back to me, and he remembered stuff I did, which I can't believe that, like kind of showing off a little. And again, it wasn't because I was such a great basketball player. I could have been practicing the cello instead of spinning a basketball, and the coach wouldn't have noticed at practice. So he was a great basketball player. Girls loved him from age 13. He did get bullied a little for being small, but they would just, partly because he's a great athlete, but he would, women were always running after him, screaming Prince. And when I say girls, I mean 12 and 13 years old, and he was 12 and 13, and that's another thing about him, how he didn't have any suits against him for harassment, or there were no skeletons. There's lots of things that weren't known, but there were no like skeletons dancing around there. He didn't have any secret satanic lives.
Great. We have a few. Okay, we're doing good on time. I'm gonna combine a couple of questions here because they're getting at the same thing. One, Sarah asks, "Do you feel like Prince is still with us in a spiritual way? Have you received any signs like many of us have?" And the second part I'm going to ask was from Melina, who asks, "What lasting legacy do you think Prince leaves for the next generation of artists?"
Those are two very good questions. And I believe people who think I don't know if he speaks to them, but it's like the memory of him. For me, I don't think he's talking to me. I think he made there. I think it's spiritual, the way you remember people. And I felt that when after 4 years after he died, when it finally came to me that, God, I think he was a friend, that felt spiritual. And it wasn't like him talking from heaven, you did right, but it felt. And so I don't know. I don't know about the spiritual thing. I think people live on in many different ways for many different people in many different ways. So I don't discount anybody's. I just think my memories of him are what's alive. And the second part of the question, I forgot the second part of the question.
What is the
legacy
that he's left? Mm-hmm.
Well, I think he's not going to be like, I think he will be remembered. I think he will, I genuinely think he was like a Mozart or something, and not like Bing Crosby or Bob Hope, these guys who were the biggest stars of 1950, but no one remembers now. I don't think he was a passing fad, and I think there still will be biographies written of him. And there's that legacy, and also more practically, just the business aspect. Artists, musicians will have more control over their work because of things he did and sacrifices he made. And I think that legacy will live on. So I think both artistically and, just dollars and cents wise, his legacy will live on. And that's spiritual, I think, if that makes any sense.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Prince appeared on the Muppet Show when he was going by the love symbol, and it was just it's so great because one, the Muppets, and they're a great organization, but they were respectful of it and they had to include it in that. And so if you can get the Muppets on board for children's programming, I think in terms
he loved to surprise people. I mean, he just
so great.
And that was another part. I mean, that was another slice. He loved making kids laugh. Across the street is an ice cream parlor, coffee shop where I work, and a few times I took him in there, and he just loved kind of freaking out the baristas who were, 18 and 19, not freaking them out in a bad way, but like, in a way that he, there's that persona, the Muppets making kids just go goofy. And then there's the persona of the guy who really hated reporters. And, you said earlier, I think I was lucky that I was a reporter. I'm very unreporter-like. For better or worse, I'm not a, just the facts, ma'am, type of guy. And so I think that I was a reporter, but I was also kind of weird helped,
I pressed the wrong button on someone's question, so I want to answer it aloud. Yes, we still have signed copies available, so if you put an order in, I will see to it that you get one. And
you can
yes, I Scout's honor. And I believe, yes, there is an audiobook version available, correct, Neal?
Yes, and that one has got the clips of him speaking. There's a little, like 1 or 2 minutes before each chapter. And that's kind of fun and it's me reading the book, but again, there's complete sentences. And yes, the audiobook is available.
That's really special. Okay, there's still several more questions that we do not have time to get to, unfortunately, but I really appreciate everyone. So I'm gonna try and I'm going to read some nice things that people have said, which are not necessarily.
And write me on Facebook. It may take me a while, but I will. And I'll answer everything. It may just take me a while, But you guys are great for coming. So if something's unanswered, I'm just always late, But I will get to it. I promise.
Thank you. I'm very appreciative of that, and also to everyone who's joining us. Angie says, I've been a Prince fan since I was a teen back in the early 80s when it wasn't cool to like Prince, and I've always been fascinated by the fact that Prince fans come from all races and class. This is actually a question, I apologize. Do you personally feel that was also a unique gift that Prince's music had, that it was kind of, it crossed maybe color and class lines?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. he was recording his first album. He saw Lenny Waronker, the president of Warner Brothers, came in to watch him. He actually kicked Lenny out of the studio, but he said, "Don't make me black." And people took that at times. Like, he was a very proud African-American man. He just meant, don't stereotype me. Don't put me on just the... So he crossed over, but then he came back. He wanted to do everything. And it was a special talent he had. And he once said, you know how easy it would be to just change a chord in Let's Go Crazy and have a brand new song? And he showed me, and it was interesting catching a genius in the act of being a genius. And he could have just done that. He could have done Purple Rain over and over again, but it also, and sold 15 million records every time. But it's also the fastest route to being an oldies act there is. So there is something. It crosses all boundaries, all orientations, all races, all classes, and I haven't seen anything like it. And it's remarkable, and I think he will be remembered.
Okay, this is a nice note. Deb says, "Congratulations, Neal. Your book arrived in Melbourne, Australia yesterday. Can't wait." This is a different person visiting us from Australia this evening. "Can't wait to finish your work today. It's Friday here, so that I can read it all weekend. I read some snippets last night and found it hard to put the book down. Thank you so much for sharing your special relationship with Prince. There are so many facets to him." So,
oh, that's so nice. And his last tour was in Australia, and people there really got to see the last of Prince. And they're great fans in Australia. It's interesting, and they're great fans in Japan. I mean, it shows again he had something global, intergalactic about him, and no one's been able to put a name to it yet. I don't think it exists in the dictionary, but it really transcended everything. And I think he wanted to be an international icon, and he knew he was. I just really don't know if he knew he was like loved as a person. Not to be too touchy-feely, just in that basic way. I don't want to sound like an armchair psychologist, but there was a real person there who had real insecurities too, and we're lucky to have had him.
Agreed. There's another nice note here from Sarah Blue. "I think both you and Prince embody a lot of what is wonderful about the people in Minneapolis.
Oh, Sarah.
The graciousness, and you both understand the nuances of the personalities we have."
Oh, thank you, Sarah. That's really nice. Yeah. I hope there aren't like 500 like really nasty comments that you're like shielding.
Absolutely not.
Some people are coming after, like there's a tiny percentage of the Prince world that's, 99.99% are just great people, but it's, thank you for shielding me from, the haters. So.
Yeah, nothing to shield you from, but certainly there are people that do. I'm sorry we can't get to everyone's questions. There are a lot, but to wrap it up, got a couple of questions, and it was on my list as well. So I guess last question: do you have a favorite Prince song or album?
Yeah, I have two favorite songs. One is just nostalgic in the way when you first fell in love one summer, whatever was on the radio. When I did my first interview with him, he was putting together Raspberry Beret. And so I've always loved that. And I love the song Willing and Able, which is a very different style, but I got to say Raspberry Beret. And I don't know how much is from the heart and how much is from the brain. I just love that song, and I love that, I can't, if I'm lucky enough to last till the nursing home, I still think I'll get up and dance to that,
I almost wore that suit this evening, but didn't. The cloud one, it's so good.
Yeah.
Neal, thank you so much. This was I'm alone in the store now, so I'm going to take my mask off. Just trying to play it safe, but I'm all alone now. Neal, thank you so much. This was such a privilege, and
Thank you, and thank everyone out there. Thank you all, and I really appreciate you taking time. And thanks, Car.
Yeah.
Thanks, Green Apple.
Of course, thank you. I would be remiss if I didn't make one last plug for Neal's book here, This Thing Called Life. This is truly entertaining, truly insightful. I'm so glad you all out there, all over the world, could join us this evening. It was such a treat. It was delightful. Oh, and there was someone who asked whether or not, if they weren't able to attend tonight, or if someone wasn't able to attend, if they could watch this later. Yes, it will be available on our YouTube channel, youtube.com/greenapplebooks. Give us a couple of days. Additionally, we do have just a few book plates, signed book plates for Neal's book left. So if you want to get that order in while they're still available, I would highly recommend doing that. greenapplebooks.com. You just put signed in your order memo. Neal, thank you again. This is a real pleasure.
Thank you. Well, goodbye from Minneapolis, everybody. Come visit.
Yeah, we'll
See you later.
do.
Bye-bye.